You can't call the industry a monolith. It's never been. From an historical standpoint and from what I see like now, contemporarily, it's far more factioned. It's got far more subgenres than people realize. I think there's a norm in looks and a norm in this, but that's thinking about just one slice of the industry.
I'm Cindy Darnell. Welcome to The Erotic Philosopher, the podcast where we examine and explore sex and relationships through social, personal, cultural, scientific, political, and other lenses, and unpack and explore your erotic quandaries with the world's wisest erotic philosopher. In this episode of The Erotic Philosopher, I am delighted to introduce you to filmmaker and pornographer artist extraordinaire, Shine Louise Houston. As the founding producer and director of Pink and White Productions, which is the CrashPadSeries.com and Pink Label TV, Shine Louise Houston has always had a unique vision. Graduating from San Francisco Institute with a Bachelors in Fine Art Film, her works have become the new gold standard of adult cinema. During a 5-year position at the women-owned sex toy purveyor Good Vibrations, Shine recognized an underserved demand for an alternative to mainstream pornography and began to create well-crafted queer-made porn. Shine's films have been recognized among the next big wave of women-produced porn and have been internationally screened from Amsterdam to New Zealand. Enjoy today's discussion with Shine Louise Houston. Shine Louise Houston, it's an absolute pleasure. Welcome to The Erotic Philosopher.
Awesome. Glad to be here.
And I've known of your work and I've been following your work for many, many years now. And for folks who are certainly familiar with my work, certainly my clinical work, I wrote a paper several years ago about using porn within therapy, and I referenced quite heavily, in fact, I referenced the Crash Pad series in particular, and also I've just finished writing a book which is coming out later this year where I talk about the Crash Pad also, because it really is my go-to porn site, education site, erotica site, whatever you want to call it, for people who really need to see your work. So for people who are listening to this podcast who perhaps have never met you, have never encountered anything about you and your fabulousness, what would you like them to know about you? How would you introduce yourself?
Oh, it's so hard because I'm not great at talking about myself. Jez is great about talking about me. I mean, the basic story is, graduated with a film degree, worked at Good Vibes for a number of years, and then, kind of combined the two and created the company, which is Pink and White. And, in 2005, we started, or we shot the original movie, The Crash Pad, and that kind of became like an instant cult classic.
Really? It's just certainly in sort of queer and alternative spaces, it is like the ultimate in, queer porn, alt porn, feminist porn, all of the whatever kind of extra sort of labels one would put on it to distinguish it, I guess, from regular porn. So let's start there. In fact, let's actually start there about, traditional porn versus your porn. What do you reckon about even splitting them up? Are they all porns, or how does it all work, do you think?
I mean, my opinions and attitudes about the industry as a whole has obviously changed over the last nearly 20 years. Working within it and around it. There are, I guess, because at the time there are certain conventions that I maybe didn't really know about, that I just didn't adhere to certain conventions, and that kind of already put me outside the box, outside the norm. You can say that.
So when you were a fledgling filmmaker in a not making sex films, or
like just I'm specifically thinking about the first film that we shot, which was The Crash Pad, and like I said, there were some things that I just wasn't even really aware of that, like I said, we didn't do, which, like I said, put us outside the box. And my focus was at that time to feature folks who were more queer looking in the way that I, was familiar with queers looking. You know what I mean? Because there were like a few titles, a lot of them were from the 80s. You were like, it was like Nina Harley and like Butch Lee Dykes and all that kind of stuff. There was some stuff from the 90s. What is it? San Francisco Lesbians, that series and stuff. And like that was out, which anyway, and they were featuring like, real butches and real queers and all that kind of stuff. But that was like that was more my focus, see butches, see brown people, and see more folks from like my community. Not just like, big boobs 27. But I still don't understand, because like there were so many people who were doing something very, very similar to what I was doing before I was doing it.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
And, so why this caught on like wildfire at that time, I honestly still don't really understand like what happened, like what was the combination. There was even Early to Bed was doing something very, very similar. And it was like the first movie that I did. When I look at it now, I'm like, fuck, I kind of cringe at it, because we really hadn't kind of perfected our shooting style. And, I fell into a trap where I see a lot of, younger, like adult filmmakers fall into this trap too, especially if you have a film background. Everything before the sex has proper film language, right? It's got good grammar. And then once they get to the actual sex scene, it's like everybody loses their mind.
And all the etiquette goes out the window.
Yeah, there is, and like you're trying to catch everything all at the same time. And I feel like that's the trap that I fell into. And we're crossing the line constantly, and there's zooms and this and that. And every time I look at them, I'm just like, oh God, what were we doing? But it's the same thing. You kind of lose your mind because you're like trying to catch everything. And everybody's kind of like, the way we shoot was like, here, you kind of do your thing. Like at that point, even then I was directing a little bit more than I do now. Like then I was kind of like, can we do this and can we do that? And it kind of happened for a second, but then they wound up doing their own thing anyway, and we're trying to like scramble to catch up with them and all that kind of stuff. And that's just not, I think, over the years, like we refined the way that we shot, and now we have a definite look. We have a definite style, we have a definite look, and it is very, very different from mainstream. I'm not saying that it's better. You know what I mean? It's just different. I want a particular grammar, when I shoot, because it makes it far more easier to edit too when you're dealing with shots that have good grammar. Do you know what I mean? And everything stitches together well. And so, for the end user, for your, audience, it's a more seamless experience. So, because what pulls me out of scenes a lot of times, if I'm looking at somebody else's work, is if I notice the camera work too much, and I'm not really getting pulled into the scene, I'm like, I notice it, and I'm just like, yeah, good scene, but it could have been shot better. Like good idea, but slightly poor execution. Anyway, those are important things for me.
Yeah. So it's that sort of that combination of your attention to, attention to detail, attention to aesthetics, and as you say, that you do have your own sort of look. Your work is especially unique in the field, and it does distinguish itself from, I guess, what used to be mainstream. And now that, would you say that porn is a little more egalitarian across the board, or democratic, let's say, than it was when you first ventured into the field?
Yes and no. Already the accessibility of technology, like once video hit in the 80s, and especially when it got a little bit more accessible, like even in the 90s, that started to make it a little bit more egalitarian, right? So it was economically more accessible. So suddenly you had more filmmakers, you had more voices and all that kind of stuff. But even then, it's just, you can't call the industry a monolith because it's not, and it's never been. It's been it's all from an historical standpoint and from what I see like now contemporarily. It's far more factioned. It's got far more subgenres than people realize. Do you know what I mean? I think there's like I said, a norm in looks and a norm in this, but that's thinking about just one slice of the industry, and then we're not talking about like all the subgenres underneath, it's just like, and then you have BBW, and then you have like, what used to be called suburban, it's just like, you have like brown people over here. I mean, the only thing, I wouldn't call porn a monolith, but I do, what still kind of bugs me even today is that it is unbelievably segregated. That's my issue.
Okay. So say more about the kind of segregation that you're talking about, it along racial lines, along gender lines.
Oh, yeah. Around gender lines, around racial lines, around sexuality and all that kind of stuff. And, the way all that stuff plays out as far as like who gets paid what and who gets hired and all that kind of stuff. There's like, some internal, nuances that are just like, ooh, people are still doing that. It's 2000 and you're not getting hired. You're not getting paid the same. And that's something that was really important for us. Like, no matter whether you're pro-am or pro or amateur, you're getting paid the same, whether or not like you're doing everything or, kind of keeping your clothes on and stuff, like you get paid the same. And that was really important for me also, because I don't want somebody to be in the situation. It's like, oh, well, for $200 more, would you please do this? And you're kind of like not ready or prepared for that. I don't want to be in that type of situation with performers. So it's just like, here's the fee, do what you feel is appropriate for this talent fee. And that's essentially how we work.
Yeah. So you've never been big on directing the scene and sort of influencing how the talent move and what they do and how they do it?
No. Occasionally if, our system is kind of has a kink in it and we're like, hold on, let me adjust the cameras, which is pretty rare. My direction is primarily with the cameras. It's not with the talent. I kind of in the beginning, before we shoot, particularly with Crashpad, this isn't necessarily with features, which sometimes have different parameters because it has to fit within a narrative. But mostly I'm like, hey, what are you going to do today? What are your ideas? What can I expect? And it's like, I'm like, great, you can kind of be in this area. If you're in that area, you're kind of out of the light, but pretty much my job is to follow them and make a coherent story. And this is once again coming back to that idea of like, my pitfall in the beginning, just like, I got to get everything. And at this point, when we're telling talent like, yeah, do whatever, we can handle that because the way we shoot is like, I'm not trying to get everything. What I'm trying to get is a shot that I know will connect with this next shot.
Okay. Yeah. So you're watching these people, fucking, I guess, in front of you, and you're thinking, how am I going to make this?
I'm editing.
How am I going to? Yeah. Right. Okay. So there's part of you that's there, and then there's part of you that's looking at it through a whole other lens, right?
Oh yeah. And it's funny because like, sometimes, well, not anymore because we don't have enough time anymore, but, me and my partner used to kind of look at the rushes, and what I'm looking at is just like, God, I wasn't paying attention to my edges in that shot, or just like, oh, look at the shadow that the highlight that I got over here. And I'm like, not even thinking about like what's happening.
Right. So that's the real artist's eye, isn't it? You're looking at the aesthetics and everyone else is looking at the hot sex.
Right. Yeah. It's funny because like it's definitely it's like, what is it, like patting your head and rubbing your belly at the same time and juggling simultaneously, because I'm thinking about my camera and my frame. I'm looking at the other camera, and since I know my setup pretty well, I can see, like, I can pretty much eyeball like what their shot is. You know what I mean? So in my head, I'm editing those two pictures together. And if I think that they're not matching, then I'm adjusting their camera and my camera, and then also, you kind of have to keep track of what's going on with talent, not just because I want to be ready to move, because you can feel it when they're about to move or switch or anything like that. But there are times where it's like, I'm really trying to, also ping people like emotionally where they're at.
So say more about that, because I think that that's such an important ingredient in, let's say non-mainstream porn, for just argument's sake, that sort of, and in your work especially, that palpable, passionate connection that the performers have. And I don't know if they know each other out offset, maybe they do, probably a little bit, but to the degree that it's this extraordinary connection, and you don't see that in a lot of porn, but in yours it really comes through.
Yes, part of that is editing.
So say more about that, though, because it creates a really rich experience that I think people who find traditional, especially traditional, hetero style porn to be very ho-hum, that find this to be incredibly invigorating and intoxicating and inspiring, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that the first point was like clocking people emotionally. I'm saying, like, is somebody getting too tired? Did somebody just get a little weird or nervous? Or, every so often, not every shoot, but, there have been times I'm like, hey, let's hold on. Everything's still good. A lot of times right before I'm about to be like, ooh, I think I need to call hold. Something's happening. They'll call hold themselves. And they're like, oh, you know what? I really need to adjust this. I need to do this. I need more of that. So I do pay a lot of attention, like I said, to what's emotionally kind of happening, just to make sure that everybody's still cool. It's very rarely that I've ever killed a shoot. There have been a couple of times where, one time where I actually just was like, we're just not shooting because I'm getting you're way too nervous and not really into this. I was like, here's a kill fee. It's okay. Manage without it. But I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's so intimate. It's so this. And I'm like, yeah, that's the way we shoot. That's what I'm talking about, having film grammar. Essentially what we're doing is we're shooting everything like it's dialogue. So, you get the eye lines, so you've got one person is definitely talking to the other person, and this person is reacting. Oh, let's see what they're reacting to. And then, oh, this is the thing. And then cut back to this other person's reaction to the thing that they did that reacted. So, just like in dialogue, they talk about throwing the ball, you have a little ball of energy. That's your line, right? You toss the ball to your character tosses it back. And so that's basically the same principle. It's just where is the ball going? The ball just went to this character. Now the ball is going back to the action. And the action ball is now going back to this other character. And it just goes bing, 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 bing. And that's just, it's, cutting dialogue.
It's just the way it rolls. How do you feel about, and I suspect that you probably didn't set out for your films to have an educational element to them, but that they are that for some people. I wouldn't say everybody, but how do you see the role of porn and education intersecting and especially now that it's more than just sex education, but it's also about, social justice and liberation across the board. How do you feel about being somebody involved at that level in all these things?
I
know that's a big fat question, isn't it?
I don't really feel like, I specifically not actively taking on that mantle. Do you know what I mean? I think that's not my main focus. And if it was, I think I would fail miserably. Just to note that, porn is like graduate level studies of sexuality. It's not entry level. And, if we're talking about sex education, we got to go back to comprehensive sex education in schools. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, let's talk about consent. Let's talk about, I know certain schools are like, have boys and girls together when they talk about what is menstruation, what is an erection. I'm like, yeah, you're supposed to have both of them should know this shit.
Yeah, everybody needs to know
and
about
so
this.
kind of it starts there. Do you know what I mean? And and I feel like, in my opinion, this porn shouldn't replace that type of education. Do you know what I mean? It's not where younger.
Did you say it shouldn't replace?
Shouldn't. No.
Yeah,
this is not
right.
where younger people should be going to get that type of education. I feel like that, like, adult entertainment is for people who are like, hey, I've had some experiences, and I'm like, oh, what else is there? Do you know what I mean? Or it's just like people who are looking for something new or looking for validation. Do you know what I mean? Feel like a lot of people who find Crash Pad are like looking for validation for their own sexuality, or being like, oh, these are possibilities for what my sexuality can be. Do you know what I mean? So in that sense, like, we create kind of like a portal of possibilities, or like, we're a mirror for what's going on in the community right now. And it's really interesting, kind of like a sociological project. If you look at what the trends and the styles were like in 2007, as to like what people are doing now, it's really, it's kind of an interesting study of like queer.
Can I ask what some of your observations have been that in that sort of 20-year period or 15-year period?
I think the people who self-select has changed a bit. We get way more trans women now. We got a lot of trans guys in the beginning, and it was quite evident. It's like, no trans women are applying. But then I think a couple of years in, we worked with Juliet, shoot, I can't remember her stage name. But she came back a few times, and it was just like, I was so happy that she came back. She was like the first person that we worked with, like, yay. And then after that, it gets slowly be like, oh, this person was on the site. Oh, I can apply. And that's kind of how it happens, how people kind of self-select. It's like, oh, this person is totally like me, or I would like to be like that person. Do you know what I mean? And then eventually things kind of change. I still feel like we haven't totally got the ball rolling with, say, like older talent, but we have had quite a number of scenes with older talent, like 50s, 60s. And so I'm like super happy about that. I'm like, where are the rest of you?
Yeah. How do you put the call out for people to want to be in your films?
At this point, we get so many applicants. It's like we don't really have to do much outreach anymore, because like we just got tons of people.
That must feel good. That you've got people just knocking your door down going, pick me.
I mean, like in the first year, we had so many no-shows. It was so horrible. We'd be like, hey, do you want to shoot? Or we'd get somebody to apply. And then like the day of, it's like, we can't make it. And, like, they get cold feet and all that kind of good stuff. But, but now people are just like, yeah, cool. This is totally legit.
Yeah. Right. And maybe because, has sort of, porn and erotic film become just a bit more mainstream. It's become, Do you find that it's become less stigmatized and less taboo? Or because sometimes I'm a bit out of touch, because I just orbit around people talking about sex all the time. So sometimes I don't know what's going on. But
there's still a lot of stigma. I mean, there's a lot of financial ghettoizing of the industry. Like, I can't get my own merchant account, because I'm too serious. If anything looks weird, like, I could lose my bank account like in a second. There's a lot of things like that. Like, I still don't go around telling everybody that's what I do. It's not the first topic of conversation.
What do you tell people? I used to tell people I was a kindergarten teacher, and they'd be like, oh,
I tell them I do video, but like a lot of times I'll be like, yeah, I do corporate video. And that shuts them up because corporate video is like so boring.
Yeah. It was the same with the kindergarten teaching. People would be like, oh, okay. And that's it. They don't ask anymore.
I just feel like, it's not always, I wouldn't say like appropriate, but it's just like not always anybody's business. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know
exactly what you mean.
It's just like, I don't need to, but if I'm going to be friends with you, if I'm going to know you, sure. Like everybody who knows me, like pretty much knows what I do. I'm pretty like private, although like several times, because like I'll be in an article in like New York Times or something like that. And then like somebody will come up to me and it's like, hey, I saw you in the paper. I'm like,
busted, just like
busted.
that.
But it's usually been pretty positive and stuff. But like, I do like to, because people have really, really strong opinions. Do you know what I mean? They got real strong opinions.
Especially about sex.
Yeah. So, I let people get to know me first before they find out what I do. And that's what I mean. It's just like, there's still a lot of like, actually, I would say the worst is with other filmmakers, I will tell other filmmakers, yeah, I do documentary. Well, you tell another filmmaker that you do adult and they just think you're scum.
Wow. How do you deal with that? I mean, because you've been, to me, you're one of the, you're top of the pile in terms of sort of, the feminist, queer, alt porn world. To my mind, when I think about that world, I think of you, frankly. So for your contemporaries to think that you are scum, because I'm just, I'm offended on your behalf. And if I were there, I would defend you, without a shadow of a doubt. How do you deal with still in 2022 and after the culture that you've created around your films and the legacy that you have built for yourself, that, there are still going to be some of your contemporaries who look down their nose at you?
I'm like, that's just the way it is. I don't know like how that's particularly gonna change. I think people's understanding of what porn is and what it can be, I think needs to be broadened. In 2010, I went to the first time to Berlin Porn Film Festival. And I was completely blown away by everything that I saw there. And I was like, oh my God, here are my people. Here are other filmmakers dealing with sex on screen, like in a very, very deliberate and thoughtful way. And I was just like, my mind was like, I was like, I need more of this, and more people need to see this. And so that's what prompted us to make Pink Label TV, which is basically our distribution. It's for other people. Because like when I saw this work, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is really, if you talk about like film that's pushing a genre, and I'm like, this is pushing a genre, but I was like, nobody's ever going to see this again after it's at the festival, because some people just are making it for the festival. It's a one-off. It's not like something that's going to be on like AEBN or like Hot Movies or Game Link or, stuff like that. It's not that type of material. It's just like, it's one of the things, like some of the stuff is like, when you look at it, was like, was that porn? I don't know what that was. Do you know what I mean? But it's like some really interesting stuff. So then that's why we started like distributing a lot of stuff that we saw at festivals. And then because like I said, I think there's a lot more possibilities of what this genre can be. Because there's some really intense stories to be told about like sexuality and particular experiences. And I can't tell all those stories. It's not my experience. You know what I mean? Just one voice. So, I really, really, really wanted to give a platform to like all these alternative kind of like experiences. And then kind of fast forward, when 2020 hit, we were about to launch our first film festival, San Francisco Porn Film Festival. And it was going to be the first like ever. And we lost our venue, of course. And
because of COVID, not because of
COVID. And we were like, okay, let's go online. We finally made a decision. We're going to go online. And because we had live streaming capability, but we hadn't really been using it very much. But like we were pretty much set up, we're ready to go. But then I realized there are all these other festivals, like, once again, like adult festivals and stuff, who were going to be just tough shit out of luck. So what we did in 2020 was we're like, hey, you can use our platform for free. Because I know everybody is strapped for cash. Everybody's freaking out. Nobody has a venue. So I was like, here, just stream with us, which is, it was a win-win situation for me because I got to like, I get to look at all these other films. And two, I got to, cut my teeth on broadcasting, which we've gotten a lot better. You got a lot better since then. So, we're doing good. And we've got repeat customers again, like this year.
So you're hosting another online festival this year?
We've hosted several, quite a few now. And like I said, like in the first year, we're like, first time free. We let everybody, it's just like, dude, just use our platform. Because like, I'm so afraid of just like small festivals like that. If you're gone for a year, you're out of people's minds. Do you know what I mean? And like I said, like, I think it's really important to show this type of work and to show the possibilities of what this genre is, to kind of, once again, like break those stigmas. Because like, to jump backwards a bit, like one time, I was moving our studio and the mover was a film student. And I was like, yeah, we're adult. He was like, oh, and I said something about like, oh yeah, the Kino's over here. And he was like, you know what Kinos are? I'm like, yeah. Yeah, we use Kinos. And he was like, oh, I thought you just like slapped up one light and this one. I was like, no. And, I also think, to kind of tangent for a second, in 70s, mostly, that golden age of porn, like around 70s, late 60s, late 70s, it was called the shadow industry because like it was everybody from Hollywood. It was totally normal. Everybody in Hollywood, when they weren't doing a Hollywood film, they were on set of an adult film. They were using different names and stuff, but like everybody brought those skills, those professional skills.
So the production crew, not the actors necessarily.
Yeah, production crew.
But wow, I did not know that.
It's pretty freaking common that you worked in Hollywood, but you also would work possibly in the shadow industry, which was the other Hollywood. And you're working with like the same gaffers, same lighting, same equipment. Do you know what I mean? And it's just like, why did the 70s look so good? I'm not talking about like the 8mm reels and all that kind of stuff, but the actual features, like, the actual erotic features that they were doing. It's because they were
set up by the same people.
Yeah, it was the same people.
Wow, that is really interesting. Maybe other people know that, but I did not know that.
But it's just crazy that people think like, oh, you obviously don't know anything about film if you're working in the industry. Well, actually, the industry used to be tangented to Hollywood.
Right. And then over the years, it increasingly kind of separated and went more underground and then became...
And I would definitely say it's because of video. The way people consumed was different. The way people produced was different once video hit. And then, once again, it went to an extreme in that point. Like once you had like online content and everybody could be a producer because everybody had a phone and a camera. You know what I mean? So now it's like really, really different in that sense.
It's this new evolution of things like OnlyFans and people, taking the images literally into their own hands.
Which I think is like great for talent. Like it can be. I think I think you really have to hustle like to make money, but you are kind of in control of how you're presented, which sometimes you are not in control of how you are represented and tagged and all that kind of stuff when you're dealing with other producers and studios.
Yeah. Tell me something. What do you love most about the work that you do?
Oh man, that's a hard question right now. Well, I guess I'll answer it this way. Because for right now, like I said, that's kind of a complicated question right now. But right before COVID, we had finished what do you call it? Chemistry Uses the Pain, and I feel like I had kind of been chasing something for a long time. It's just like, from about the third movie when we did Champion, I was like, I'm editing to a formula that doesn't really fit my work. Do you know what I mean? Like the pacing of Champion, I always kind of joked. It was like plot, sex, and plot, sex. You know what I mean? And I was like, that's wrong. Something is wrong with this. Cause there's kind of like a standard of like, the sex scene should be like a certain amount of time, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever. And I'm like, this is not working. And so like I tried different things. And then finally, once we got to Chemistry Uses the Pain, I was just like, even though it's not like a perfect film, I feel like I was like, I got it. I feel like I finally got it. This is how long the scene should be. It feels right. It feels like everything kind of flowed into the next thing. My idea is like, the plot doesn't lead to the sex, but the sex leads to the plot. And so I had to turn my head a little bit. And so I feel like I finally got it. And in that moment, after I got it, I was like, great, I'm free to do other shit. I suddenly like felt like I had this freedom. And right after that, I did a little short called Camera and I. And it's more than say like, I did like this little poem before. It's called Birthday. It's a very structured, very, very structured piece. It's like a haiku, and I really enjoyed that. But this was different. Like this was like, I had taken off all, I don't know, like restraints or like, I was just like, okay, I feel like I can be free with the camera again. I can just play with the camera because I kind of, it's like the film structure was kind of like just naturally inherent. Like I wasn't trying to think about it. I was like, I kind of just felt like.
So that sounds like you cracked your own code.
Like I cracked my own code. And so then like, I did this thing that was a little bit more like free and intuitive. And like, even the editing process was just like, I coming from a painting background. So I likened it to like, this is like the intuitive fun that I used to have with painting. And it was just like, the editing even was just like this wonderful conversation, like editing. And, I had some fun with it. And, and I was just like, all right, let's keep going with this. And I had some other ideas that I wanted to do. And I wanted to just take that wave of inspiration, like, let's just go forward. And then, COVID hit and it was like, like just everything freaking crashed. And all of the projects that have been in my head for like the last couple of years, they're still in my head.
Uh-huh. So what does the future hold for you then, in terms of, let's if we sort of err towards the side of optimism and think, okay, maybe we're going to get through this pandemic. Maybe in a year from now, everybody's just going to get an annual booster and we can go back to something that resembles a life, a consistent external life. What does the future hold for you in this new world?
At the moment, like all my energy is going towards the broadcasting of other people's festivals and like supporting that. So a lot of my effort is going there. But if we're talking about creatively, I think I was just talking to my partner because I was like, I need to start off small. And she took it very literally. She was like, you should do this scene with like miniatures. And I'm like, that's maybe not a bad idea. But I've got like some ideas. They're still, it's really, really hard to get the machinery going. And then, if there's a big wall in the way, it's really hard, and then it's hard to get people back together and get the momentum of a production. So I don't know. I don't see myself doing any real production like this year. Obviously, Crash Pet series is still going. I'm seriously considering doing the miniature thing this year because it would just be me, like with a tiny model set, and it'd be kind of funny to do like this weird kind of like.
It would be really cute.
Who knows? Like I may or may not do it, but mostly I'm trying to figure out how to get the mojo back, and because it really messed me up. Like it messed me up good this year.
Yeah, it sounds like it really took the wind out of your sails, and especially when you were, about to launch your own in-person festival. And of course, obviously, you have to shut that thing down. But do you feel like you might try and revive it again, maybe next year or in 2 years from now?
We actually did a hybrid in-person and online festival just this past year in 2021. We're going to do it again in 2022. And like I said, we're still helping out like a bunch of festivals this year again, even some, civilian festivals. So, we're kind of branching out a little bit.
Right. Wow. Leaving the sex world behind. Who are some of your favorite pornographers?
Well, that's got to be Radley Metzger. I am a big Metzger fan. And even when he was like, was it? I always want to say Henry Paris, but it's John Paris. When he did, opening of Misty Beethoven and stuff like that. I had a big film crush on Maria Beatty. And I still love her work. Like Black Glove is probably still like one of my favorites, and like Converted to Tickling, like The Black Box. Those are some of my favorites. But I always like the weird stuff.
Yeah. Do you get tired of looking at porn? I ask that because as a sex therapist, I do get tired of talking about sex sometimes. At work, I'm fine, but in my private life, I actually tend to not talk about sex that much because I do it so much for a living that on my days off, I just, I want to talk about gardening or dogs or whatever. And so is it the same as when you're a pornographer? You don't want to watch porn on your days off?
I was never a big porn watcher. So, there are some things I'm like, if I think if I think we've picked up something really fun on Pink Label, I'll be like with my partner, hey, did you see this? Check this out. And like we'll watch stuff together. Mostly we talk a lot about film. I could talk about film for days.
So that love is is still there.
That's real.
That's fantastic.
But yeah. I don't know. Yeah, so I guess I don't get sick of it. I guess it depends on, what it is. But, I do watch a lot of cat videos, and on my Instagram, I only post pictures of my cats. So, and, I watch a lot of really geeky science videos on YouTube at night. So
do I.
Do you really? Yeah.
Oh, I watch all kinds of stuff, just random sciencey documentary, just obscure little things. I go down these rabbit holes because often I find it more entertaining than anything that's on Netflix or any of the bigger, platforms that I'm like, they don't really, I'm not the target audience, but the weird shit that you find on YouTube, I'm definitely the target audience for that. So you know what? I really appreciate you taking a chunk out of your day to talk to me about sex and porn and film and those kinds of things. And as we start to wrap up our conversation, how can people support you? What do you need from me and from the people listening to this podcast to help you individually, specifically, and your company, and then also broadly, more people like you, people making, queer, alternative, inclusive porn? What can we do to make sure that you are not just surviving, but you're thriving?
I mean, one, of course, always pay for your porn. But two, just like tweet about us, like, send us some love every once in a while. Every once in a while, we get like an email. It's like, oh, this is so amazing. But I always say it's like I kind of work in a vacuum. Like I feel like I don't get a lot of, it's because I don't meet the audience like face to face or anything like that. You know what I mean? So sometimes, it's easy to forget, like, is this still good? Is anybody out there? Is this
thing on?
Are we still relevant? Are people still watching?
It seems to be, as you say. I mean, you've got people clamoring to be in your film. So I would take that as a pretty positive sign that you're more than relevant.
Yeah, just publicly, like, send us some love, or like, like, be like, hey, like, share us with your friends and all this kind of stuff. Just like, because I feel like what's really helped us survive and grow and be a healthy company and all that kind of stuff is just people who like us talking about us. Do you know what I mean? Just kind of like spreading the word. It's like, hey, this is kind of cool. We should check this out.
Yep. So, for us folks who are on, this side of the fence, the sex side of the fence, and we don't have the privileges and the access to various platforms and promotional avenues that more mainstream businesses have, it's so important that people talk about us and refer to us and do these kinds of things. And especially so, I mean, in my profession, I can kind of dance around it a little bit because we can just call it science and people start to take it seriously. Whereas yours is, it's a tough sell, trying to convince the powers that be that what you're doing is valuable and it matters. And that's why I have tried, since I've had a little bit of clout, to support you and Pink White Productions, because I think what you're doing is phenomenal, and any way that I can encourage more people over to your platform, I do it. I will do it. I will continue to do it. I have done it, and that's the way it rolls.
Hey. Awesome.
Thank you so much. I'm going to put links in the show notes so people can track you down and find all the things about you. And I would love to chat to you again sometime.
Yeah, excellent. This was great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed today's discussion with Shine Louise Houston. And to find out more about Shine's work with the Crash Pad and Pink Label, check the links in the show notes on ways to follow her work, and also, as it's really important with these independent filmmakers and pornographers, to offer support as you can. Speaking of support, if you love The Erotic Philosopher, consider also supporting us. You can follow us on social media. We are at The Erotic Philos, that's PHILOS, on Instagram and Twitter. We would also absolutely love it if you would rate and review us on iTunes. You can find the link for that on my website. That's cindydarnell.com, CYNDIDARNELL.com. Select the podcast tab from the menu where you will find links to all of the previous episodes of The Erotic Philosopher, plus a link to iTunes where you can rate and review your experience of The Erotic Philosopher. You'll also find a link there to leave questions for future erotic philosophers to ponder. While you're on my website, check out my services. I offer counseling and coaching to individuals, couples, and beyond, online via Zoom, all over the world, helping people transform fear into freedom and create a life worth loving. And most of all, I encourage you to consider purchasing and pre-ordering my book, Sex When You Don't Feel Like It, The Truth About Mismatched Libido and Rediscovering Desire. On my website, select the books tab and choose your platform for pre-ordering and purchase. It's a wonderful way to get the knowledge you seek about creating a sex life that is as interesting as it is satisfying. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode today, and I look forward to joining you again soon. Take care.